I'd like to show you through the ArchiCAD template 25, what's new, how it works, how to download it, and how that works once it's downloaded, how to open it, and how to use the files. This is available from archied.com.au. You can download it from here. Once it's downloaded, you'll then end up with a folder like this. It'll probably be zipped to begin with, so you have to unzip it. Once we open this file, the ArchiCAD 25 template comes with a PLA, so that's the archive file, but it also comes with a new file, a PLN, and this is a reference file. Let's switch to this view. So I'm going to open both of these files. The first one, a PLN, we can open in a couple of different ways. So I'm just going to double click this, and this is automatically going to choose to open with ArchiCAD 25. I've got ArchiCAD 24 on this computer as well, but it's generally going to open with the latest version of whatever you're using. If you try to open the PLN with version 24 or older, 23, 22, 21, it won't work. It's saved as a 25 file. Now you could backdate that to version 24, but this one's specifically created for version 25, which means some of the functionality won't work if you open it in an older version of the software. When you open up the template file or the reference file to begin with, you're going to find that you have some things that look like they've gone missing. And that's because your folder system is different from mine. So we'll press OK, we'll let it load, and then I'll show you how we can find and load those libraries that might be missing. Now I chose to put mine on the desktop. Now most people have a desktop, so that makes it pretty easy, but depending on whether you're using a PC or a Mac, you're going to find straight away that the libraries are going to have some issue finding themselves, and that's always going to be the case. So if we go to File, Libraries and Objects, Library Manager, we see here that it has automatically linked it, but it's saying there's nothing there. I can't find it. And when we go to the warnings, there's all these things that are saying it's missing. So we're going to delete this version. We'll go Add, and we're going to go to, in this case, instead of finding it from my original location, we'll go to Desktop. We'll find the folder. We'll select it. Press Choose. We see now it's 22 megabytes, not 0. We can reload and apply. And now we see that all of those missing things have gone because it's found them all. Great. Now this reference file has been created because a lot of people have asked me, can you please provide a reference file which explains how you work? So this is a full professional project that I've been working on. It's got a lot of information in it, so a lot of project map views, a lot of saved map views, a lot of layouts, and also publisher sets. So it's a full file for you to muck around with and play with to understand how my files interact, how I use them, and how that makes sense in terms of the template setup. So you can scroll through, find a particular drawing, see the way that the layer combinations work, options, element attributes, layers, see how the layer combinations relate to the layers and how that relates to what we actually see on the page. And you might flick through different plans, so GA general arrangement plans, RCP reflected ceiling plans, electrical, lighting, right? These are all saved views as part of this, as well as sectional views, elevations, and so on. All right, now before we go any further, we're not just going to spend too much time looking through the reference file. We also want to try to open a template file. So let me show you how we now open a template file. To do that, it's slightly different. File, New, New. So we already need to be in ArchiCAD. So if we weren't already in ArchiCAD, we'd have to open a standard one. Now we'll see that when we open a new project, it's going to say, what do you want to open, or what sort of a template do you want to use to open it from? So if the ArchiEd template isn't here, you need to browse for it. I'm going to browse for the template file. We're going to go to Desktop again, ArchiEd template, ArchiEd 25 template. We can see that that's the only one that gives us the option, TPL template file. Open. In this case, I want to launch a new instance of ArchiCAD because I want to keep both the reference file and the new template file open so you can see how it works. Here we can keep with the current profile, or we can open a new one. In this case, I'm going to leave it like this. And then once we're in the template file, I'll show you how to import work environment toolbars. So this is going to open up a second application, a second version of the ArchiCAD program. So that way we can keep the original reference file open as well, and the second file. Now, what we could do in other instances, if you've got dual screens, we could have these on two screens. I'm not going to do that in this case. I'm just going to have both open on the same screen, and I'll flick between them so you can see them both. Most importantly, the ArchiCAD 25 template file is exactly the same as the reference file except for the modeled elements. So all of the modeled elements of a full project are in the reference file, whereas the template file is empty. Why is that important? Because we want a template file to be empty. We still want to have all of the setup. We want the project maps, the view maps, the layout book, the publisher sets, the element attributes. All of that is within the template file, but that way you can start from scratch each time. The other way of working, which I sometimes do, is to use a reference file, as in another project that I've done in the past, and then copy paste. Start to create a new file from that one. A template file is better. It's more precise, it's less likely to result in errors, but they both can work. Alright, so let's switch to the template file and start to look through and understand what's new about version 25 and how this works. We're going to start with the options, element attributes, layers. There's been a few changes made to the layer combinations, but mostly it's the same type of process. One new thing that I've done with the version 25 is to create framing layouts as modeled and represented in my reference file. So in that case, I've modeled an entire framing layout for the house, for this building, and so therefore a layer combination to represent that. Otherwise, we'll see this is mostly the same. One slight change that I've made recently is I now have a different elevations layer combination to a different sections layer combination. But otherwise, you'll see that most of these are similar to how it looked before. If you're new to the ArchiEd methodology of layer combinations, the way that I describe layer combinations is they should be like drawings. So we want a different type of layer combination for floor plans. Now, when it comes to floor plans, generally I'll break that into, is it a presentation floor plan or is it a documentation floor plan? Now, you might say, well, we could have different stages of documentation. We could have DA documentation, which is development application, CC, construction certificate. We could have for construction, right? So all of these would normally fit under my documentation stage, whereas presentation might be everything up until that. So then, how do we get those different views? Well, we develop the model, that's partly the answer, but we also use other things other than layers. We also use graphic overrides and model view options in order to represent the drawing in different ways, particularly between DA and CC level. Now, if you're not sure how this works, as you flick through the layer combinations, let's choose sections, we see that different layers are going to turn on and turn off. And all of these are unique ArchiEd layers. These aren't standardized layers, similar with the layer combination. Options, element attributes. Let's have a look through the line types. The line types have recently been updated in version 25, and I've updated my ArchiEd lines to suit. And so these use some of the normal lines that we're normally used to seeing, as well as a few special ones, but generally these have been explained in the ArchiEd way. Options, element attributes, pens and colors. This is a big change that I've recently gone through. Version 24, the premise or the idea of pens in this case is to create 10 pens that are all black. Each of these pens increase in pen thickness, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. Now, why have I done this? The way that ArchiEd pens, the way that ArchiCAD pens are set up is based on a historic method of how we used to use CAD, say AutoCAD, where a different color would represent a different thickness of line. Now, this is also based on when we were manually drafting and we'd be using pens, rotary pens or something similar, mechanical pens, and they'd have different color bands around the pen, which helped us to understand what's the thickness of the nib. Now, we don't need to do this anymore in ArchiCAD because ArchiCAD gives us the ability to see the line thickness. Therefore, I don't want to use color to represent thickness. That doesn't make sense. I want color to represent color. If I want the drawing ultimately when I print it to be black, I'm going to use a black pen. If I want the lines or the fills to be colored, I want them to show as they will print. And that was the premise behind 24, and that's why we see there's such a range of colors, and the first 10 are pen thicknesses that will all be black. In version 25, I've changed this idea. Basically, I was sick of fighting with standard ArchiCAD settings where particularly complicated things like rails and curtain walls had all these subcomponents, and they all had random, wacky pen assignments, which meant that we had to spend a lot of time changing each of these pens to be black if we wanted to, which just didn't make any sense. Also, I worked out that based on all of my 24 pens, I never used all of these colors. There was just too many colors. So the idea of the pens in 25 is the last 3 columns are dedicated to colors. And this is a pretty broad spectrum of all the colors we want. Very bold colors, and then much more subtle colors. And of course, we can apply a 25 or 50 or 75% to these as well to dilute these, to wash them out even more if we want to. But the majority of the pens here are black. We still see that we have 1 to 11 in this case as black, but we also have all of the other rows underneath black as well, which just means that for the most part, most of the ArchiCAD elements straight out of the box are going to be black pens, which is what I want. And then only when I want to give them a color for representation do I then choose to assign the colors this way. So this is the big change. The grays are still pretty much as they always were. This is the big change for the pens in ArchiEd 25. Options, element attributes, fills. There's some changes here. I've added some fills. I've taken some away that were a bit unnecessary. The best way to understand these fills is when you go to the layout book, down the very bottom under attributes, I've created a list of all of these fills. So this is a representation. We see that this is a link. So when, or a save view, right click, open source view. This is going to take us to a worksheet, and each of these fills is of course the actual fill. So 25%, 50%, 75 empty and solid, gradient fills, cut fills, face vectorial fills, face symbol fill. So this is a great graphic way of understanding all of the fills that are available. And so this can be understood by the user by interacting with this worksheet and maybe choosing the fill that you want, because it's very hard to sometimes find what fill you want, particularly when it comes to these more complicated ones like stone and tile and paving. So this is a really good way to be able to find the fills that you want and be able to access them very quickly. And of course, this can be published with your set as well, which makes it great for someone who's trying to understand what the fill that you're using is. And it gives you a great sense of scale of that fill and how it will ultimately turn out when you publish it. We see that I've also done this with the lines, options, element attributes, surfaces. Not much has changed with the surfaces list, but we see that it also includes all of the color bond colors. I've tried to really simplify this one for version 25, just so it's not overly complicated. But of course, we can import through our Cine render a very wide range. So load CD4 settings. So we can import a great deal of surfaces that way as well. Options, element attributes, building materials. The building materials haven't been updated very much since version 24, but we see that this is a full range of ArchiEd building materials. So what I've really tried to do is to go through and create customized versions of all of the elements that we normally use, so they all make sense with the building materials that we use and the way that we want it to represent. Options, element attributes, composites. There's quite a large range of customized composites here for, again, all the standardized types of construction systems that I would use based on Australian construction systems. Options, element attributes, profile manager. I've also created some more customized profiles, particularly for footings. There's also a large range of steel members that have been pre-installed into this version. So rather than having to import those, these are already built into the file straight away. So you can import those, and they're all based on Australian steel section sizes. Of course, you can do that and import from a lot of other places as well. So if you're wanting to get profiles from other places, you can import those profiles from any other country's standardized steel sizing. Options, element attributes. We can access and understand all of these also through the attribute manager and see all of these in one go, where we can toggle between these windows. Apart from element attributes, what makes the template file is the way that the project map has been set up. We see this project map again is very large. Some of these will be empty, of course, because this is the template file, and that's why I've provided the reference file as well to explain the functionality of these when it would otherwise maybe not be understood. Worksheets will always have information still on it. These aren't modeled elements per se. These are a separate two-dimensional universe within ArchiCAD, and so even once you delete all of your 3D physical model elements, all of these graphic worksheet elements will remain. Details are also the same to a degree. Details will exist depending on what you've drawn. 3D documents. Now the 3D documents, as the name suggests, are very much based on a 3D part of the building. So you'll find that when you go to the existing shadows in the template file, you won't see anything, and that's a bit unhelpful. I appreciate that, which is why there's the reference file. So here when we scroll down, we can do this either in the project map or the view map. Let's scroll down. If we go to our 3D documents, let's say we're trying to go to shadow diagrams, if we do this in our project map, we might not get the right result straight away, and that's because we haven't selected the right layer combination. So we see this looks a bit strange. So in order to fix this, what we should really be doing is always going through to access our views based on our saved views rather than our non-saved views. So we can see that we can access all these through here. We'll go to the pull down menu, shadow diagrams proposed. We see that now represents more sensibly. Now we see proposed is blue. The shadow diagram, there is no existing in this case because it's not an existing building. But when we go to our layouts, shadows, shadow diagrams, the way this works is that this is set up with multiple elements all in the shadow diagram. So if I pull this away, we see there's multiple views. 1, 2, 3. 3 different views which are all over the top of each other. These create or are based on an existing shadow diagram, a proposed shadow diagram, red and blue, and then of course that creates a overlap which gives us a purple outcome. So when we're dealing with new and proposed work, we end up having a purple finished result, showing where there's an overlap or a consistency between what's proposed and what's new. In our layouts, we see that there's a large array of layouts that are already set up. A new function, relatively new to this version, is now a concept design set and a documentation design set. And this is really to separate the presentation pre-DA level and then post DA moving forward through CC and for construction, which would all be contained within the documentation pull down. So we see that's the larger range. Under masters, I have a variety of masters. Generally speaking, I use either an A1 or an A3 page. I don't use anything smaller because the idea is that if we use an A1 page at 50%, that's A3. Similarly, if we're using an A0 page, at 50% it's A2. And of course, at 25% it's A4. So by using this mathematical system, I don't need a variety of masters much more than what I already have. A1 and A0 is large enough that we can fit most of our drawings on it. So if we scroll down, let's find reflected ceiling plans. So this allows me to fit 3 plans here side by side. Depending on the scale of the project, depending on the type of the drawing. Let's go to framing. In this case, it's a larger drawing. So this is 1 to 25 at A1. So we see that I can fit 2 of these on the page because it's a relatively small project. In this case, I can fit 4 sections on a page. Now, the intention of how this works is that, generally speaking, the majority of my drawings for residential purpose will be at 1 to 50. So I'll aim to achieve floor plans, sections, and elevations all at 1 to 50 on an A1 drawing, which means that when it's output on an A3 drawing, that equates to 1 to 100. I mentioned both of these. I actually don't do printing. I try to stay pretty much paperless in my office, but that means if it's being sent out to a builder, if they want to print it, then they understand the ratio and relationship of the scale. And for that reason, I also include a graphic and a paper scale, meaning that if I send this to a printer company, I need to confirm for them, they need to understand that this needs to be printed at exactly 50% if it's going to be at A3 and exactly 100% if it's going to be at A1. And the graphic and paper scale just helps me to confirm that. So if I go to pick up prints and they've just clicked print to scale, for instance, or fit to scale, and therefore they've not taken account of the percentage, then that's going to destroy the drawings. The drawings are still going to look accurate, but they're not going to be to scale. They're not going to be printed to scale. So it's very important, because I've put thousands of hours into doing my drawings, I need to make sure if I want them to be printed, that they get printed to scale. And that's how we confirm that, by having this graphic scale on the side of the page. The other big element that's in these ArchiEd 25 templates is the ability to have very detailed schedules. This is something that I'm very interested in, because I not only design but also build these houses. So I want to have very developed drawings, but also very detailed BIM model, which can then specify all of the members, the framing members, the quantity of roof sheeting, the quantity of glazing, the quantity of concrete, even the amount of cut and fill on the site. Now, ArchiCAD is terrible at the formulas. It doesn't do maths very well. So we see here that what I get as the output is what is my terrain new, terrain existing, terrain fill, and hard. And putting all these together allows me to quantify and determine how much fill is leaving the site, how much soil might need to be added to the site for any project. And that really helps in the design phase as well as the construction phase, because it means that I'm designing, thinking about how the building is going to be built.